Alright, I just want to have a little bit of a discussion between, basically on morality, but on a couple different concepts with that fall under morality. I guess we have the good and the right, which coincide pretty well. Then we have justice, and basically what I'm trying to touch on is how certain actions on um, based on justice and good and the good, and virtues that fall under the good, kind of can conflict with each other, um, possibly leaving you with a possible problem as to what you're supposed to do, depending on um, whatever whatever kind of normative prescription you have. Um, but what pretty much what got me thinking was this George Zimmerman trial. If you don't know who George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin is, you kind of been living under a rock, and don't watch the news. Um, Last weekend there was a verdict from the jury of not guilty. Now George Zimmerman, who lives at Retreat in Townhome Lakes in Sanford, Florida, um, apparently there were some break-ins beforehand, and then he saw Trayvon Martin walking through it, and was, making some assumptions. Called the police, who told him to wait for them and not follow him, and he followed him and he killed him pretty much. And then there was the screams, and what the debate is as to whether this was a self-defense kill. Was Trayvon Martin attacking George, um, or um, was George making assumptions and had thoughts of hatred, thus causing him to be suspicious of him, make assumptions leading him to killing him, um, in the second-degree murder thing, or manslaughter. Uh, so the whole thing kind of, I personally believe, and most people actually believe, that George Zimmerman killed him not out of self defense, but out of feelings of hatred towards Trayvon, and out of um, dislike for him, and suspicions, and assumptions. So the prosecution pretty much showed pretty well that that George Zimmerman had some thoughts of hatred, and was having some thoughts that were against Trayvon, and then he was making some assumptions that were, not so correct, I guess, or either that, or they weren't, you know, grounds for him to be following him, and attacking him. So pretty much what I think is, I think that he should be serving time for secondary murder or manslaughter, probably manslaughter. But that's kind of what I think about that. And we see all these protests and all this violence. We see in California primarily. Um, that lots of people, most people anyway, think that Trayvon was killed not out of self defense, but out of um, profiling and racism and stuff like that. Now this is kind of like an all out. It's kind of become a all out war on profiling. Like the NAACP guy was kind of saying, we need to stop profiling, and I disagree with that. I think we need to have some profiling, but what George Zimmerman did, I believe, was wrong, as do many other people. So, but my question here is, with respect to the jurors. The jurors. I mean, if I was a juror in that case, person believing that George Zimmerman did this not out of self defense. Um, the question is that since the prosecution did not do well enough, they did not do well in that they did not prove without a reasonable doubt that um, George Zimmerman killed him not out of self defense. They didn't prove that. They showed that Zimmerman had feelings of hatred, and was kind of not they did not show what they're supposed to show. So the honest jurors were forced to give a not guilty verdict because he was not proven to be guilty. He was not he wasn't proven to have killed him. With the manslaughter or the second degree or the second degree murder charge. So the question here is, if I was a juror, having because the prosecution did show these feelings of hatred towards Trayvon by Zimmerman. So logic would tell you that he probably did kill him. I mean, he probably just did it, and I believe that. So being a juror, it would be honest to return a not guilty verdict because the prosecution didn't prove it. But is it good? Is it within the concept of the good to do so, even though, even though there was not proof without a reasonable doubt. So that's why I think that these two concepts, good and right versus justice, kind of conflict. I would define good as not so objective moral value, but a morality in that well, first I would define justice as each person getting certain consequences based on the things that they do. If I give $1 million to a charity, if I had $1 million, then I would supposedly get some kind of thanks from them, as well as some other positive consequences from them. Then that would be what is due to me if I were to do that. However, if I were to kill somebody, then the consequence that would be due to me would be life in prison or whatever, some kind of sentence that would be me taking my lumps. That is what I believe justice is. People taking certain people getting their due consequences based on their actions, and I don't believe Zimmerman. I don't believe that there is justice in this case, because he's not going to jail and he's not going to pay for what he did. So, I mean, the question here is, justice is not being done here, but then we have this virtue of honesty that falls under the good. Honesty is a good virtue. It's a virtue, not a vice. And being honest would be returning a not guilty verdict, because there is no proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he did do this. Even though logic would tell you based on his feelings, George Zimmerman's feelings towards Trayvon, that he did, but there is no reasonable doubt, or there's no proof beyond reasonable doubt. So I guess we have this honesty thing that falls under the good. It's a virtue that falls under the good. So that's pretty much the thing here. Honesty would conflict with justice here. So pretty much, like, is it possible? The question here is it all out possible to be always good? Can there be an action that is virtuous in one stance and not virtuous in another? Because returning a not guilty verdict on the juror's part is honest. However, there is no justice here, so it's not being just. So that I feel like that there's some conflictions. There's some conflict within all the virtues that fall under the good and the right. So that's my thoughts here, and I saw this thing on iFunny which says, "We kill people who kill people because killing people is wrong." Now think about that one. I mean, now Dexter does that. That's the show on Showtime. Dexter, he kills people who commit horrible crimes. is what Dexter does just? Um, is it good, or is it good overall? Is it just? First of all, I think it's just because those people who kill women and children, or kill anybody, are getting something that could be due to them. So it could be argued that if you kill somebody, that then you should know what it feels like, you know, to have done to you what you've done to others. Um, but I would say that he might just, in my opinion, Dexter isn't really just, that they should just go to jail for it. But I don't know. So these are these questions here that leads me to think that it's very, very possible that all these virtues that fall under the good can be conflicting. Just like think about the idea of lying. Um, the idea of possibly lying, um, to lying. Well, let's say we have to lie to keep somebody who is innocent out of prison. Um, lying is not honesty. However, keeping the person out of prison is definitely just, because that person didn't do this crime, so these consequences are not due to them. So I guess, I what I'm thinking here is that in a certain ethical theory, we would have to draw some lines. I guess draw some lines as to, which virtues are important. Um, which what is it very important that we have to be? What certain way do we have to be? Um, I mean, because I think that it would cause that these problems would cause more problems in a deontological theory, because if we have a set of rules, that these rules could conflict with each other. However, we could still have virtues like honesty and justice could conflict, um, because being honest may not always be just, and that being just would be very dishonest. You know, I think that turning in a guilty verdict when you believe that there was no that there's reason that there's some kind of reasonable doubt, that's justice. However, it's not honesty. So these are some big issues that would have to be drawn some lines, and more so in a deontological theory, of rules and duties and obligations, more so than in a theory of virtues. Um, I would say that in a theory of virtues it would be easier because, um, um, I would say that that some virtues would have to become more important than others. Like in the case of Zimmerman, if we were talking about virtue theory, the virtue of honesty, I would say, would be more important than justice, because the stars are not to that so to speak, the stars have aligned a certain way, or things have turned out a certain way that you as a juror couldn't really be doing anything about it, other than doing what you're supposed to do, turning in a verdict based upon reasonable doubt or not. So in virtue theory, it'd be easier. But um, in deontology, it would be a little bit harder. So yeah, that's my little discussion. So let me know what you think about these little, um, ideas of morality and good and right and justice, and let me know, like, what extra problems you think would happen, because this is just something that's very, very interesting, I would think.